Welcome to episode 5 of Community Solutions Minnesota Radio Podcast. I know, it's been a while. I know, it seems like we've been missing in action and you've been waiting with bated breath for the next episode, or not. But here we are, and it's been a busy spring. We're going to tell you all about it. To my right, as always, is Mr.
Andrew Richter. Always a pleasure to listen to ourselves on the radio, isn't it?
Oh, yes. And this is Jason Bradley. So, yeah, we have had quite the winter and spring as we've kicked things into high gear here with Community Solutions Minnesota.
The weather might have been cold, but we've been hot. That's what I say.
Yes, true enough. So, I guess first we would like to tell you a little bit about an event that we've got coming up May 17th over at the VFW in Crystal. And it's 5222 Bass Lake Road, is that right?
I think so.
Okay, can't miss it. It's right off of County Road 81, just west of there. And
south of the airport.
South of the airport. If you're coming from Highway 100 and coming along Bass Lake Road, you can't miss it either. Just keep going. It's going to be fantastic.
We got training, good food, and cheap drinks. That's how I see it.
Yep. So what we are doing is a local candidate training session. This is something that we kind of conceived a while back. In fact, I think last year I'd written the first draft of the manual for this. And with the intention of this year going ahead and having these training sessions. Well, we're going to do the inaugural one here coming up on May 17th. So we want to make sure that you go out to www.communitysolutionsminnesota.wordpress.com and go to the candidate training page and sign up, because let me tell you, as you've said, this is going to be the best money that you spend all year if you're running for a local office.
Well, and I, here's the thing. I mean, so many people, you and I have for years listened to people who want to run, thinking about running, and it's always there's always the well, what do we do? How do we start? What do we need? And that's the kind of void that a training like this can produce. We're going to give. And another thing too is you listen to people and why they want to run, and it's I don't like this and I don't like that, and I want to preserve, which are all great intentions. Don't misunderstand me, but there's a lot to this part-time job that you're venturing into. And like Jason said, I would if you're thinking about it, maybe this isn't the year for you. If you want to get involved in a campaign, or if you just want to pay attention and do the things that we've done locally, which is do the recruiting. Not everybody's role is to be a candidate.
No.
And so there's that learning curve. We want to bridge that. We want candidates to be able to know the issues before they get there and not learn on the job. And believe me, when you and I have pitched this, which we'll get into in a little bit, to people, we've gotten a lot of feedback on, where was this 4 years ago when I was running, or something along those lines. And, I know for me, I thought I understood all the documents when I ran 2 years ago. You know what? I feel stupid now that I know, even though I feel my role is what we're doing now, I know how much goes in how big your local government really is, and that if you're going to make changes, the degree to which things are there that are entrenched, I'm going to tell you, you're going to walk away. It's going to be information overload. I'm just going to warn people out there, and that's not, I don't want to scare anybody, but it's the kind of thing where we don't mean to freak you out, but you might be freaked out a little bit.
Well, and people have asked me, and I know they've asked you too, well, is this kind of like that American Majority training that, they used to run a candidate training in
You and I
Minnesota?
both did it.
Yeah, and, that was a pretty good training, and it taught you a lot about using Facebook and, that kind of thing, some fundraising techniques. But let me tell you, it never got to a local level. It was never specific to running a local campaign or really to Minnesota in general. It's something they did all over the country. This is going to be, I hesitate to say just a little bit, but this is going to be better just because, like you mentioned, the information that you receive is going to be so much more valuable. It's one thing to run for an office and be able to run a campaign. It's another thing to be able to run for office, sound knowledgeable, sound informed, instead of just opinionated, and also be able to run a good campaign. And so those are things that I think differentiate what we're doing from what's been done in the past.
Yeah, and I think that, I went through American Majority, and it was worth the day to go. I'll say this, we're substantially cheaper to go through a training. And I think for the money, I think you're right. You are going to get a better training. And I did learn a lot about campaigning. A lot about how to organize. I mean, they didn't lack ideas. But
No.
I think, like you said, when you talk about our area, there's certain issues in Minnesota, there's certain arms of government, there's certain structures that you're just not going to hear about until after you get there. And then you got to learn how to deal with them, learn what it'll take you 2 years to get up to speed. And I think, again, part of what we're doing here is bridging that learning curve and that gap in knowledge. I'll make it a little personal. I've talked to people who are in office, not necessarily the people that like me, and I can tell you that I know when I'm talking to somebody who's clueless, and sometimes they're people who've been in office for quite a while. Mm-hmm. And you and I have talked about how it should be the council making policy, not staff.
Yes.
Making policy, and if we're ever going to make that change, well, how do we make that change if the council isn't knowledgeable on these issues? I mean, if you're not knowledgeable on zoning and planning and the structure of the county and the Met Council and how property taxes work and how a comprehensive annual financial report differs from a budget, how are you ever going to make policy? The staff will always know more than you, and they'll make you look like an idiot.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. We're in this training going to go over those things. We're going to go over how your form of government is set up and how it works, what the city departments are supposed to do versus what they do.
How it works, not necessarily how it should work.
Right.
Let's differentiate that.
Well, absolutely.
How it works, present tense.
We're going to talk about comprehensive annual financial reports, budgeting, comprehensive plans. We're going to talk about how to run a campaign from A to Z. But going back a little bit, and something we will talk about at the training is, and as I've been learning about comprehensive plans over the years, there's a term, and I know we haven't talked about it a lot, I don't want to scare people off, called human scaling. Now that sounds like a vicious Roman practice, but basically what it is, you're bringing things to scale for all humans. So that means, to put it bluntly, really, it's taking and making sure that those who have the least always have the same opportunities as everybody else in your community, and that is what these people are trained to do from the American Planning Association, the City Manager Associations, and you can actually take city planning or city managing as college majors. So this is not some sort of half-baked idea. This is permeated in from the beginning, and so this is where you come with things are like transportation is a right, where you come with, or transit is a right, maybe is a better way to phrase that. Swimming pools must be equitable. Those kinds of ideas that we're hearing now.
Housing must be affordable, whatever that means.
Yeah, and so that's where we get a lot of these new ideas from, is this human scale development that they're doing. So it means making sure that aprons are like street aprons for driveways or along sidewalks are prevalent everywhere, so that people who have disabilities are able to use the sidewalks.
And I'll tell you something, it all is bred out of the same thing and the same philosophy.
Communism.
Which is to take from one person and give to another. Now, we don't call it socialism. We don't call, these people come up with new words all the time to describe what they're doing. In human scaling, while, it sounds medieval, is very real. And you got to remember, if you're a kid, if you're a college kid and you're being taught this, then, look, I've said this before. I'm 37 years old. I've grown up in a country that I don't know freedom. Okay, I don't know, and you don't either. I don't know a country where the government's not in charge of my education, my utilities, my health care, my retirement. I don't know that world. So if these young heads of mush are not, thank you, Rush Limbaugh, are not exposed to freedom, they're never going to know what they're losing. And another thing it comes down to is, I believe, and I know you believe this too, in the rights of the individual.
Yes.
That you look at people and you don't put them in groups. You don't make assumptions based on their parents' occupation or on their race or any. Everybody has talent. They just have to realize it and get the opportunity to do those things that their talent would lead them to do. And and that's it's a critical philosophical difference out there is equal opportunity versus equal outcome. Well, equal outcome is impossible. I mean, literally. I mean, can a baseball team win every game?
No.
I mean, it's. But again, that's all part of it too. We don't keep track of the soccer game.
Right.
There's this culture out there that. That winning and you should never have a failure in your life. Anything goes wrong, you should sue somebody. Anything goes wrong, you're entitled. And we're going off subject, but it's permeated into our planning and into the way local government thinks and works.
Yep, absolutely. And so we're going to really delve into that in this training, and present not only, I guess, the problems as we see them, but how should it look? I mean, we've got these comprehensive plans that run how many hundreds of pages, and they use the same terms as just about every other comprehensive plan.
I mean, my goodness.
I mean, whether you look at stuff from Minneapolis or Crystal or Dallas or Tampa, and I'm doing a little bit of research, even into like Canada, and my German isn't any good, but maybe I'm going to look and see what they got going over in some French-speaking countries and see if we've got some of the same thing going on.
Well, the head of ICLEI is the former councilman in Canada. I can't remember Vancouver, I think.
Yeah, I think you're
David
right.
Cadman's his name, and he is a very active in the Green Socialist movement. And it's surprising. I know you're shocked at that. But again, one of the things with planning is one of the things with things like the Met Council and regional agencies is there ways to bypass your elected officials. That's one of the tenets of what's going on is that you, if your elected officials won't do something or don't do what, quote, they want, they need to find ways to get around that. However that's done. They'll call it some fancy term, and they'll use equity or the environment as the pretext. But again, and you will see this at the training, it is language that is universal. And the language means nothing. I mean, affordable housing to me doesn't mean a thing. I don't know what that means at all. But you will hear that term over and over and over.
Absolutely.
So the top-down push is a major issue that is the city level where it has to start being pushed back. We can't run to St. Paul. St. Paul's had 100 years to fix these problems, and all they've done is create more. So it's going to happen from the bottom up if it's going to happen.
Yep, I mean, that's where the fresh and new ideas have to come from, and the fresh and the new leaders have to come from, and that's why we need to have a farm team of people that have these fresh new ideas, willing to push back against the county and state governments and the federal government where they're able to do so to make these new ideas work, where the Federal Transportation Administration and Department of Urban Housing and Development they want to make these cookie cutter communities across the country. We want leaders to rise up who say, I want what's best for my community. And, maybe the best thing for my community isn't to run light rail through the middle of it, or to put a residential area facing a frontage road, or to,
Well, about the latest issue in Golden Valley, that they built things so close to railroad tracks that people can't get to sleep at night because the trains are going by in the middle of the night honking their horns.
Yeah.
Again, poor planning.
Planning.
You're right. The whole thing is that when you get elected by a ward in a city, you are not obligated to represent the county or the state. You are sent there by your friends and neighbors. They expect you to put your city. And the best thing for your city might be to do nothing.
It's possible.
To me, the less government does, usually the better.
Yep.
But what's wrong? Ask the question like this: why is my neighborhood so terrible? What's wrong with it? Why does it need this change? And look, you may be in a neighborhood where change is needed, or investment as the government, private investment, but or there may be bad roads or houses that are vacant and not safe to live in, not built up to code. There may be needs for some of that.
Yeah.
But think about, when you read a comprehensive plan, this is what I say. Think about if everything in there was implemented, would you still want to live in the city that you envision? And how much money would it take to do that? How much construction would be going, disruption to your lives? Put yourself in that situation, then tell me whether your plan is so good or not.
Yep.
And usually it sucks. I'll tell you that.
Well, I mean, look at some of these plans. Take Hutchinson, for example, where they already have above average when you take into account the number of parks within the city, and they say it's not good enough. We need more parks, and we need greenways to connect those parks so that people can get from park to park to park.
Yeah, we can't drive from park to park. That's destroying the environment, right?
Right. So we need to look at local solutions, because these are solutions that have been handed down through various levels of government, and that's why we start to get these cookie-cutter cities. Now, I think it's also important to note, like Andrew said, maybe your city does really need a park in a certain area, or maybe you really do need some sort of street reconstruction, or you need a sidewalk built. I mean, that's what city's there for, but it's to be made at the city level. And that's where we need to train people up and to help realize, hey, this is needed, but this is not needed.
Right. Well, it's also, let's build a sidewalk because the residents here want it, are going to use it, and understand that there's a cost and a maintenance associated with it. Then let them decide. We shouldn't be building a sidewalk because Hennepin County signed on to Complete Streets Minnesota, or because we need to connect this road and that road. That's not a legitimate reason to do something. There needs to be a need. There needs to be how it's being, because it's being paid for by us, no matter what level of government it is.
Yep.
And there's a legitimate question about, should tax dollars from Utah or Virginia or Arizona be used to pay for transit in Minneapolis? I mean, to me, that's not what our federal government's role is, and 90% of what they do isn't their role. But but again, if local communities weren't there trying to get the quote free money, if they weren't following lockstep with what was being pushed on them, then we wouldn't have these issues.
Yep.
But the facts are is that they think if their city's not paying for it, it's free. Now, let me add something.
Okay.
We've gone around. I want to get to this. We've gone
Yeah.
around to conventions. We've gone to meetings with various groups. Doesn't really matter who. You out there know who you are, and what I come back and I don't know why I'm amazed at it. It's more confirmation of what you and I thought and what you and I had been studying and what you and I had been doing is the issues that we've talked about for it seems like 100 years here in Crystal,
Yeah.
and now expanding in the northwest suburbs to other cities. That Community Solutions, Crystal's where we were based.
Yeah.
It is amazing how the same issues permeate. Whether that's dealing with the Met Council, whether that's a certain type of housing that you see here and here and here and here and
Yeah.
here, whether that's street design, whether those are regional trails and green space or affordable housing or whatever you want to see, it is not a coincidence that you are fighting a lot of the same stuff. And you talked about Hutchinson. I mean, we've talked about Rochester before.
Yes.
Studying their comprehensive plan, which could turn Jesus Christ into an alcoholic. It literally is on a larger scale. I mean, it is a larger scale. The same issues and terms and all those things are prevalent. And when I hear the Minnesota Senate talk about having rail from Minneapolis to Rochester, I say to myself, if it cost $1 billion to build light rail from Brooklyn Park to Minneapolis,
Yep.
which of course they're going to lose their asses on it, pardon my French. What is the cost to build that to Rochester? And if you're not dying of cancer, who's going to go? Who's going to go on that? Is
Yeah.
Rochester? It's not like Rochester is Chicago.
Yeah, well, at least they've got the hospital. What about
Yeah.
if they get the plan to get it out to St. Cloud or out to Eau Claire? What's the draw there?
I have no idea. I don't know. I've never understood the old North Star plans.
Yeah.
I've never gotten it before. And to be honest with you, North Star is doing so bad that they're never going to qualify for any free money
Yeah.
because the FTA has two different standards. They have one to build something and one to expand something. I don't know the specifics of that, but it's so far gone that I don't think they could build it another 10 feet.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, even Streets, Minnesota, who would build a rail from my house to your house if they could do it?
From my basement to my attic.
They say that North Star is a complete waste of money, waste of time. It's not making back what it was supposed to make back, and it's not dense enough for it to work. And they say that about not only that, but they say that's true also of the Botno line, of the Southwest Rail line, and that those two lines shouldn't be built. And they said the same thing about Gateway as well.
Well, and here's the thing, and you and I have said this before, if we can't break even, and we're not even close to breaking even, going from Minneapolis to the Mall of America to the airport, and Central will lose money too, even though the density really is there.
Yeah.
I mean, in some respects, by the U and down by the Capitol, still not enough to support rail in my book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not New York, it's not Chicago. Let's be honest here.
Right.
There's not 8 million people there, and
Yeah.
it's back. Here's the bigger problem: it's backwards from how planning has always been done. You go back to New York City. And we've said this on TV before, but probably not on the radio, that the 5 boroughs of New York were there before the subways were.
Yeah.
You already had that infrastructure. Nobody had to build. Subways were, I don't know if they were needed, but some alternate transportation, I think, in a city like New York almost was a necessity.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Cities like New York, Tokyo, maybe Paris.
Yeah, London.
London. Chicago, I don't even think makes money with their rail system.
Probably not. If Denver has one. There's no way they make money.
No, Portland, they don't make money. They were decrying earlier, or like late last year, that it wasn't making any money.
So naturally, they're going to build more, I'm sure.
Exactly. That's the city everybody looks to. We got to be like Portland's transportation system, and they're failing.
Well, I think the larger point is there are a handful of humongous cities in the world that are so crammed in that an alternate need is there. And New York, which has the 5 boroughs, okay, and I'm talking about, a handful of cities here that are into one since 1898 have more people than Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska, Iowa combined. Okay, now that's not Minneapolis. Okay, so there is a big difference. And going back to the training, I mean, it's where you mentioned the cookie cutter. And it's such a good analogy that basically if everything goes forth, and I'm just talking about the Met Council, I'm going higher than that. The APA, I'll take it all the way up to ICLEI and things like that, is that your city has no identity anymore. Why move from one community to another if every community offers the same thing? Some people want space to live in. Some people don't. Every city can't accommodate every possible thing that somebody could want.
Yeah.
It's just the way to do it is to let supply and demand out in the free market exercise that. One of the things I worry about is all this push for senior housing. Well, you might say, the baby boomers, our parents' generation, are retiring now. I mean, my dad's 67, and he's kind of retired. I don't know if he'll ever give up working completely. But not every senior wants to. I mean, if I put him in one of those places, he'd disown me. And what happens when that generation dies out? Their generations had fewer children. Is this really long-term planning? I mean, is that...
Yeah.
And again, they're being forced on us, not... I don't see seniors running to council meetings demanding a huge building.
No, and that's the thing. I mean, even think about their parents, the baby buster generation. How many of them...
The World War II generation.
The World War II, the World War I generation. How many of those people went into assisted living? I mean, it was unheard of at the time, and people would either A, die in their houses and be happy with that, or B, they would go to a nursing home.
Or moved in with family.
And this really is just kind of an American idea, and not that they're bad, and if the free market is dictating these things, I think that, we go ahead, we build them, but keep in mind, this is going to be a rather short-term thing, and we're going to see a lot of vacancies and a lot of closures in 30, 40 years.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I do think part of it is generational. I think those generations had a self-reliance to them, and they didn't want, to have their diaper changed or whatever unless it was absolutely necessary.
Yeah.
Quality of life's important to some people, and it is a difference. My grandmother is still alive, and she's in assisted living. But when my grandpa was alive, my grandma had a bad stroke, and that's why she can't really take care of herself. Getting them into assisted living? My grandpa was a World War II Navy guy. Good luck talking him into assisted living. I mean, he could still beat me up when he was 80. So, I mean, no way was that ever going to happen. I think part of it's generational, and I think part of it is this idea that the government has to plan for every possible thing that, quote, could happen.
Yep, and I don't want to throw anybody in particular under the bus, but a lot of this demand, I think, is coming out of the millennial generation. Some maybe Generation X to a point, but and maybe even some with the baby boomers saying, I'd like to be able to have some freedom and not give it all up. But, like you said, your grandpa, you couldn't have got him out of your house with a bulldozer, right? But when you take a look at the millennial generation, I just think of a lot of the things that I've read that, we must have walkability, we must have bikeability, we must have the ability to easily get wherever we want, and we shouldn't have to own a car. Well, I'm sorry, but part of life is taking responsibility for yourself. And if you want to get from point A to point B, you need to make arrangements to do that and not be a burden on everybody else.
And
that's what public transportation is.
Right. It's the dependency class.
Yeah.
I've said it before, and some people, don't agree with me, but a car is a symbol of your freedom. I mean, if you don't have a car, okay, nobody's going to come knock on your front door and take you everywhere you want to go. Think about the limits on your freedom. I mean, just think if you're an average citizen and you have a car. Maybe you don't mind some transit, but you don't want people dependent on it.
Right.
And there are those that do have a need, but it is a very small percent who can't.
Yep.
I mean, that's so low.
Yeah. Well, even if we base that on economic class, let's take a look at the Botno line and how the people that really need that rail line the most, if you consider it a need, right, air quotes need, are the people who live in North Minneapolis. Now, the current footprint decided to go around North Minneapolis to go through Golden Valley, where you have people with a lot of money in Golden Valley who...
A lot more, anyway.
Yeah. I just want to be able to ride my bike to the light rail station so I can get off then in downtown and ride my bike to work. Well, what about the people who need to get to work that don't have the same, resources that you do?
Well,
they're skipping over the people that they say they want to help so that they can...
But those people are pawns. I mean, they're just pawns to their ultimate goal.
Yeah.
They're just used to make people feel bad. I'll tell you another thing, too, and we've talked about this before. Who in North Minneapolis works 10, 15 miles away?
Yeah.
I mean, why are you taking them to Brooklyn Park? What the hell is there? I don't understand it. I mean, what is the object there? And we've said before, most people don't live in a first or second ring suburb and work downtown tightening widgets. That's what we did in the 50s.
Yeah.
We don't do that anymore. Look, I live in Crystal, work in Hopkins. I know very few people who work downtown anymore.
No.
Almost none.
I travel about, 20 feet from my bedroom to where we're sitting now. I like it.
Yeah, that's your big job. But when you go and you do your music stuff, you're not going downtown.
No.
You're going around to the other suburbs.
I can't imagine if I had to load my amp up on a light rail and wheel it downtown.
You'd have to buy 5 tickets. We'd have to rely on the honor system. Yeah, so, the planning is it's questionable, to put it mildly. And again, it needs to be challenged, and that's the missing link in all of this. Is you can either go along for the ride, pardon the pun, or you can make sure that what's being pushed is to your area's benefit and desired by the citizens you represent.
Yeah, and that's why we want to teach you what these things are, so that you know whether it's something you should go along with or not. There are a lot of people of all political persuasions that get, I don't want to say duped, but they kind of go along for the ride, and it's like, hey, I'm here and I'm spending responsibly, but yeah, you're still going along with a plan that's rooted in Marxism to, you know what I'm getting at.
Absolutely.
And you've got to look at it's not all about spending, it's also about principles. And we need people who are willing to take a stand on a different set of principles because they really understand everything that comes before them. And that what I think I'm most excited about in this training is not just the information that we're going to present, but the guest speakers that we're going to have that are going to be able to tell you all about their experiences in campaigning and what happened once they got elected. I mean, we're going to have from Crystal Mayor Jim Adams, and we're going to have from Crystal council members Julie Deschler and Casey Peak. We're going to have Bruce Miller from Champlin, and we're
working on a couple others too. There'll be more, and again, you're going to hear similar stories, similar gripes, similar opposition,
Yeah.
similar recommendations from city staff and that kind of thing. And I'll tell you, jumping to the second part of the day
Yeah.
is what's really important too on an organizational level. And I think this is something missing from American Majority as well. You might say, okay, well, what do campaigns have? Well, they got yard signs. They got lit. Well, how much of something do you, quote, need? How many votes do you need? I mean, there's another thing. Who do you know? What's your base? Some people have a base because they're a member of the PTA. Some people have a base because they're a veteran and they're a member of their Legion or their VFW. Some people have a base because they're a Little League coach or something of that sort. And you got to start from that base and work out. And that's a technique that I don't want to say is new because it really isn't.
No.
But it's something I rarely hear a campaign described that way. That you don't just randomly knock on every door.
Yeah.
You have a plan when you do it. And that's a big part of this too. I mean, you got to understand the stuff. You got to understand the documents, and you're not going to get all of this when you're there. I mean, you're not going to magically understand everything. I mean, I don't want to scare people off. And I don't want to think that the 5.5 hour training is going to be the answer to every one of your questions. But you're going to walk out of there. My hope is you walk out of there knowledgeable, enthusiastic, with a plan and ideas for solutions. That's the big one. We can identify the problems all day long, but the ideas for solution are critical to have.
Absolutely. Because if you go to somebody and you say, hey, you know what they're going to do here? They plan on collectivizing garbage hauling and we just can't stand for it. Well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
How are you ready to answer that question?
Right.
If you present an issue that you feel passionate about, you have to know what you plan to do about it. And so hopefully this will help you be able to internalize that.
And I'll tell you something, take this from experience. Your number one question you'll get asked is, why are you running? Why should we vote for you? Why have you chosen to? I mean, it'll be asked different ways.
Yeah.
And I'll be blunt here, and this is something I would say at the training. I'll go into more detail there. You better have an answer for that.
Yep.
I mean, you better have a 15-second or less.
Yep.
You got somebody opens their door and you're interrupting their day.
Yep.
Okay, which we have to do because that's how you win. You better have an answer to why you're running, and it better not be because you want to be a legislator someday.
Or the city contacted you because your grass was too tall.
Yeah.
That doesn't work either. Take either end of that. You've got to have an educated answer. You've got to have, 3 points, basically.
And there's no magic answer. I mean, it can be, I don't like I don't like the level of property taxes. I want to get in there and cut taxes. I don't like what we've been doing in development. I don't, I'm just throwing things out there. I don't like the plan to develop this park into a shopping mall. And, if we don't want that, then we got to get new people in there. And you'd be here's another thing too, and this is bad of me to say, but it really is the truth. And I hate to put it this way, but people are so much more honest when you're at their door in a one-on-one setting. That's why groupthink is the dumbest thing ever invented, because you'll never get to real issues in groupthink. It's when you're one-on-one, and believe me, there are going to be people who want to talk. I mean, they're going to say, there's some cities where nobody's knocked on their door in 10 years.
Yeah.
I faced it. There's areas where people have just moved in, and they don't know the neighborhood all that well, and they'll kind of be tickled that you knocked on their door. And, oh, okay, and you can help them out, and you can be their avenue into the city. So, but there's just some things that you got to have an answer to.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but we'll save that for the training. I can't get into that.
So yeah, those are the big things that you'll be able to expect. You should come out of there at least with a good idea of how a city operates and what you need to do to at least put together a competitive campaign. because if you don't put together a competitive campaign, you don't have a shot. We can't guarantee you'll win, obviously. That would be dumb of us to do. But, we've been kind of in the mix long enough that we understand what it takes to at least be competitive. And
here's the other thing on that. If you've got an entrenched incumbent, George Steinbrenner once said his goal is not to get somebody to give 100%. It's 110%.
Yeah.
You got to get that extra 10%.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got 10% more than they think they do.
Yeah.
And so if you're running against an entrenched incumbent, you do the same amount of work they do, you'll lose.
Yeah.
That's just it's name ID, knowing people is 75% of the race. Some of this other stuff, while and I don't mean let me rephrase that. All of it's important.
Mm-hmm.
Every drop of it.
Yeah.
But you're not going to win sitting in your computer tweeting on Facebook and doing that. Getting out there is just as important, but having that back knowledge that we're going to give you is where your base has to start from.
Yeah.
You got to have that basket of goodies. I don't know how to describe it. You got to have the goods.
Yeah.
You got to have the money to go grocery shop.
Yeah.
It's kind of that way.
Yeah. So, I mean, you see how this just kind of comes out of us. I mean, here we are. We've been here 41 minutes already. We're 41 minutes into this thing, right? And it's just coming out of us naturally. So you're going to be able to fill a day up real easy with valuable knowledge. And I think that it's really worth your time to consider. So again, www.communitysolutionsmn.wordpress.com. You can go to the candidate training page and sign up. And we hope that we're going to see you out there. And just a word of thanks, I guess it would be, to all the groups that have had us out over the last few months. February, March, into April. We've been really busy, and it's been awesome. And the feedback that we've gotten has been that they have really enjoyed having us out, and it's been informational and it's been useful. And I know people have started acting on some of it. I believe Ramsey has now started a blog. I don't have the
really?
web address off the top of my head, but I know there's a group out there that's doing some good work, and we're working with some other people that are going to start doing some good work. So it's best to catch the wave now and get on the front end of this, because even if you're not ready to run a campaign this year, like we alluded to at the beginning, it's about getting that foundation set correctly so that you can build something strong and successful for the future.
Yeah, and one of these days we'll get into detail, and I'm sure we'll do some of this at the training, of how we started, what our first goals were. Yeah. I hesitate to say this because it makes it sound like I'm shooting low, but your city's not going to change overnight. You got to have some short-term goals, some realistic goals, some long-term goals. And Crystal's a city we've been working on for a while now.
Yeah.
And it's taken us, and we didn't have any direction. We were flying by the seat of our pants. And that's another thing that, we want to help people with is we've done this here. And if you don't bring us to help you, it's going to take you 4 years to do what we've done.
Yeah.
So, all right, we've talked a lot enough, don't you think?
Absolutely. So, once again, www.communitysolutionsmn.wordpress.com, or give us an email at comsolutionsmn@gmail.com. You can follow us at comsolutions. That's 2 M's and com for both of those.
And we do have a Facebook page that you can ask to join.
Yep.
And the biggest, most important thing is to get your asses to that training on the 17th. Let me tell you, you won't regret it. And folks, let me tell you something, and Jason knows this very well. It's 10 to 3:30 with a break for lunch.
Yep.
We will end at 3:30 because you know where I'm going.
You're going to the lake.
I'm going to the lake. So I will be crappie fishing that night, so we will get done at 3:30. So.
He's a motivated man. It'll happen. All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us again for episode 5. And there will not be as big of a break between episode 5 and 6 as there were between 4 and 5. I'll tell you that right now.
No question.
So, once again, Thank you, and we will see you at the training. Later.